Hello all and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria. And today we got a few things that we're going to be tackling. First and foremost, we are going to be tackling Krom. As we finished the first half of Krom's Canyon last time, we're going to be making a run through the canyon itself, making sure to leave no stone unturned, no enemy in one piece, and slowly but surely make our way through and hopefully dealing with the majority of the challenges ahead in Borderlands. And one thing that kind of comes to mind when I play this game, especially on subsequent runs, is that Borderlands is accessible. And this sounds ridiculous when I say it that way because shooters are typically one of the most inaccessible types of games out there, especially when it comes to gaming on multiplayer or online. Borderlands aimed to, at least in part, break the mold of what was considered a challenge, or what made a shooter difficult to approach in online play, and created a system of hubs allowing players to get together and play against the same enemies together, cooperation or cooperative style. And I personally love that about Borderlands because it always made sure that the game had more life to it. I always enjoy playing co-op type games with my friends because why not? But it made it so that a more experienced player when it came to shooters could theoretically host a game, bring a friend in, somebody who might not be as well versed in shooters in general, and say, let's play this. And even if you aren't somebody who is super well versed in it, there's still options and paths that one can take to beat the game that are considered reasonable. It's as a solo player, if you feel like you need to stay as far away from the action as possible, well, the sniper way is the way to go. If you're the type of person who feels like you have terrible aim, going with the Berserker Brick is a perfect solution. Because going with Brick means you don't have to worry about ammunition at all, at least based on my experiences here. With the exclusion of a couple bosses that have given me some trouble, like Mad Mel, most of this has been reasonable to complete with rather simplistic tools. If you're somebody who thinks that maybe breaking the mold of what a shooter should be by using siren powers is the way to go, who am I to say no? In a way, this makes the genre more accessible for the average player. And the other side of it is that they tried to inject humor to it. Something that might not always land, let's be real, but it makes it so that, at least in Borderlands 1, if you fall in battle, it's not the end of the world. In Borderlands 2, they flat out make jokes about how you fell in combat, and that's just the way it works. So, in each game, you're getting more information that justifies the statement of, it doesn't matter. You can enjoy the game and play it without feeling like it has to be a burden, like it has to be too much, or that there's no way to beat it. Because Borderlands has always been more user-friendly than the average shooter out there. Not perfect, let's be real, but everything down to how the game advances gives the player more to work with. An example of this is actually the early game. Now, there are some players out there, I believe his name was SpuddyCube, did a run very similar to this, aiming to beat the entire game, start to finish, without using even the standard pipe that I've been using on occasion in melee-based combat. And using the pipe was banned in Spuddy Cube's run. So Spuddy Cube did every single piece of damage in the game using just Brick's hands, effectively. And that in and of itself, absolutely fantastic, good job Spuddy Cube. But it meant that you could take the game a little bit further and not have to worry about certain aspects. And it meant that by the time that Spuddy Cube reached the first batch of enemies, had already gained levels through opening chests, effectively. It made a lot of sense in that regard that there were avenues and ways of upgrading your character without the use of major tools throughout the entirety of the game. And so, unironically, if you struggle in the very beginning because it's not your genre, congratulations. There's ways of upgrading past your problems in Borderlands 1. It has the waypoint system that focuses in exclusively on allowing the player ease of navigation. There is tools, there's guides, there's 1,000,001 weapons that are all intended to make the run as a whole more seamless, more approachable, because you're not getting lost in this wasteland like it would claim that you would. It is allowing you to explore at your pace. And it rewards exploration with additional tools, additional weapons, additional means of dealing damage. So if an enemy is too strong, congratulations! Go back at it. Try with a different set of tools. Upgrade your weapons. See what you can get into. Borderlands is great for that. So, we're at the point where we have just gotten the second piece of the vault key out of a total of 3. And so we're going to head to New Haven, cash in a couple missions, see Tannis, and then we're going to go on a little bit of a rampage across all of Pandora because of course we are. Now, the thing I love about this section of the game is that up until the New Haven portion of the game, it's pretty linear. It has a bunch of side quests, but your number of side quests in the later half of Borderlands 1 easily dwarfs that of the early half. And so, getting from point A to point B is very much encouraged within Borderlands 1, but finishing all these side quests, one after another, really ups the ante in terms of your character development. And so, it ends up in this lovely situation where if you've been doing nothing but the main quest, most of your experience is coming from combat. If you've been doing nothing but, or if you've been doing every single side quest through the duration of your run, most of your experience is coming from side quests. Options, again, that push you into circumstances that the player might not always be the most comfortable with, but also offer an additional means of dealing with difficulty spikes across the game. Effectively, it was built from the ground up with the mentality that no matter who it is that picks up the game, it is intended to be beatable. But we can go so much farther than that. Let's jump into punishment. Now, a lot of games have the quote-unquote punishment system focused in on how likely are you to want to continue if you fall. In I'm gonna pick a game here, Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda. You end up going back to one of a few different locations. If you die in the overworld, generally you'll go back to where you start, or where you die, or the area you died in. So it's not the end of the world.
I asked Pierce to give you Class A clearance, and she declined, so I stole her robotic arm until she'd give it to you. You should have little trouble moving forward. Are we friends? I think I would enjoy that.
In Ocarina of Time, if you died in a dungeon, you would end up restarting at the beginning of the dungeon. And sometimes this was perfectly fine. If you ended up falling in the Great Deku Tree right before you fought the final boss, well, you're already halfway to the final boss because you've unlocked side areas and options to get from one area to the next throughout your entire run up to that point. If you end up dealing with that problem in the Water Temple, it is far more punishing for the player to have to go back. And in Borderlands, as long as you have money, you will revive and it'll be perfectly fine. They're not going to punish you any further than, oh, yep, you fell. Good luck. Get back up, dust you off, and send you back on your way. It hurts. It's frustrating, but it's 10 seconds at absolute most, and you're back on on the go. You're back on the run. You're already fighting back the enemies that took you down. Assuming it wasn't a cliff that got you. The point I'm getting at is, no matter what type of player you are, Borderlands will have something for you. And nowhere is that more pertinent or more consistent than Borderlands gunless runs. See, I've been kind of skirting around the situation here for a while, because doing all of these side quests without the use of guns in any capacity, I initially thought it was going to be painful. Let's be real. I had expected that starting the game, playing it from start to finish, with using none other than Brick, a character I had never used up to this point before, with no guns at all, no grenades, no anything, was going to be a nightmare. I thought that it was going to drive me up the wall. And it did have its fair share of moments so far. I've had a couple run-ins with a couple tough enemies. I've had a couple run-ins with situations that felt beyond my capabilities. But at no point in time has anything been truly insurmountable. Every challenge, every situation has always had a solution, even if it was somewhat unorthodox. And the reality is that the further I get into this run, the more I realize that it might not be as bad as I thought. Because if I can do this kind of damage to a mini-boss just because why not, then I should be in good hands. It should be reasonable to beat the entirety of Borderlands 1 without the use of guns. And in a way that I think is more reasonable than I ever gave credit for. I had always assumed that it was going to be this massive problem, that there was going to be so many more hurdles, that facing off against certain enemies was going to absolutely destroy me. And to some extent, there are some that have. But when my expectation was, I'm going to struggle with Nine Toes, because Nine Toes has guns, and extra characters on his side. Cool. I fought against him, he fell. I fought against Bonehead, and I learned that he had another set of another entire set of animations and abilities that I had never seen before, because I had never gotten up close to him before. I fought against Sledge, and he was one that I had assumed was going to be awful, because Sledge has very good close-range combat capabilities. And again, no big deal. The Roid Rage Psycho, same basic situation. He was intended to be a challenge, but Brick's raw power outdid it. So where do we draw the line? What's the point in which Borderlands becomes officially too much? Well, at this moment in time, there's not much left in the way of big bosses or mandatory bosses left. There are the alter ego missions, which we fight with Slither, and I don't think Slither's going to give us any issues because I've never had issues fighting him before. There's I believe it's called the house hunting mission at the Trash Coast, which has Bleeder. Bleeder I've never had issues with before. There's a couple side missions where we had Headlob and Widowmaker, but both of those fell pretty darn quick. We have the Janus and Taylor Cobb, and both of those I don't think are going to be too difficult because they're both just slightly overpowered bandits. So that really leaves only the DLCs and possibly Master McCloud and the final boss itself as far as enemies that I think are going to give me a lot of issues. And even then, I don't necessarily think they're going to be all that big, considering what we've gone through to get here. Borderlands has been very generous in terms of levels and showcasing just how far the character can go. Now, I've been looking into different aspects of Brick as a character and how to really boost him up. And I realized that Brick thrives less on shield strength like some other characters might, and more on his raw health pool. The reason why he focuses more on his health pool than his shield pool is because shields don't really do much for the Berserker. Yeah, they deal with a couple minor issues as you're going along, but they don't add enough to the table. They don't put enough down to say, oh yeah, he's going to be perfectly fine. Generally speaking, I've been finding enemies rip through my shields in absolutely no time at all, but they can't outdo the healing that is being placed on the Berserk mode. So Berserk mode is doing an absurd amount of heavy lifting for this particular run. Brick, without going too far into it, is unironically one of the perfect characters for new two-shooter players to get into, because he is the type of character that doesn't rely on precise aim. He relies more heavily on grenades, splash damage in the form of explosives, and raw physical strength, which keeps his health pool high, his shields low, and his enemies in pieces. So maybe I've overlooked a lot of things that make the character more powerful than I would have otherwise expected. So if I were to do another Deathless run, let's assume I did one for every character, I feel as though the character that would have the best or easiest time would still be Mordecai. I'm very, very honest about it. I want to be very honest about it. I feel like Mordecai, because of his specialization and increased power with sniper rifles, as a general statement, does fairly well. But the thing is that each of the characters, I think Brick would be second. the speed in which Brick regains Berserk mode in general makes him incredibly versatile against virtually all enemy types. There's not much that can get through the raging, hulking mass of muscle comparatively to other characters. Roland has options, but Roland's options are few and far between in comparison when his ability takes 2.5 minutes to recharge. Lilith probably has a bit more of a chance than Roland does, if I'm being as blunt and honest as I can. But the thing is that Lilith's abilities increase the speed at which she fires bullets, meaning that she's really good at laying a lot of pain down in a very short span of time. But I also believe that she's got this wonderful situation of she would struggle in certain circumstances just because enemy health pools might outgrow her total ammunition count, which I'll admit has happened to me a few times in the past, where enemies are just too strong to be outdone by the tools I currently have. And it is a shame. It's something that I want to avoid as much as possible, but not something that is totally unavoidable either. Anywho, with all that in mind, I think, as I said, Brick would be second. I believe that I vastly underestimated the power of the Berserk ability, and the fact that he can very easily overpower most enemies. And so that's kind of a big heavy hitter. For him. Is he has virtually everything put in place to make him as perfect for a deathless run as possible. Mordecai's biggest benefit over the others is simply that he has longer range. But why stop there? What if we were to do a true deathless run with every character in all of Borderlands? Every Borderlands game from start to finish, and see just how much we could get done with each character. The reality is that would be somewhat ridiculous. I don't think that I would be able to do it in a single sitting. I feel like I would be pulling my hair out by the end of most of the runs. But I also believe that it is far more feasible than a lot might assume. Borderlands, as I said, is accessible. It's easy enough to get into, and as long as you're patient, you can rip through most of the games fairly reasonably without too much of an issue. I feel like of the games, the ones that would give me the most trouble would probably be 3 and the pre-sequel, just because I've played them less. And if I'm being honest, probably 4, because I've never played 4 so far. Want to, don't have a system for it yet, working on that. But every Borderlands game could be theoretically beaten in a single sitting. A single one-off attempt. And I don't want to make it sound like it's 100% foolproof. Every single character has their nuances. And it's partially about knowing what to do, what works best with the character. I mentioned Brick doesn't do well with shields. Well, neither does Krieg. Why? Well, Brick's shields run out half the time before he's even gotten close to his opponent when he goes berserk. Krieg's shield, you want a Nova shield so that when he goes down, he has a bit more of an explosive burst off of him. You could say much the same thing for Gage, who can give a copy of her shield to DT. And so on and so forth. There's various options that come up just on the fact that the characters exist within this world of games in and of itself and have more options available for them. Anyways, we could fight Janus Cobb right now, or we could go and deal with a couple side objectives. I'm personally one for the side objectives. I find that at each stage of the game, with each main quest that gets completed, I have to finish every side quest that comes up. It's a little bit of a character flaw of mine. And I think it's something that will be more feasible and more interesting with later games, because Borderlands 1 has always been it's been very formulaic with my various runs. I tend to stick to kind of the same pathing every time. After beating the game, my second time, I tended to stick more to the same path. Just because, why break convention if the convention works? And reality is, you break convention because it's more interesting. It's more fun. So, again, to each their own. With that, our second beacon is lit, and we're gonna go deal with Slither. Hoofty, that's 4, almost 5 bosses done in one day. I think we're off to a pretty good run today. Slither, Helob and, Widowmaker are 2 bosses that have been defeated rather easily today. And comparatively to a lot of mini-bosses and side bosses in Borderlands, they've actually been some of the stronger ones. I used to have to fight them with a vehicle. But Slither is one that I know the name. I don't think I've ever seen him get an attack off. I know he flies, but that's about all I got. As I was saying, I know Slither flies, but they're definitely now godless monsters, as Slither has bit the dust. So, hooray! Off to Janestown, and we're gonna finish this series of side quests off. And then I think we're gonna go deal with Old Haven. Old Haven is one area that has far more options available to the player than virtually any other location in all of Borderlands 1. Partially because Old Haven has several routes to take through it, and several side objectives throughout. Technically, if you're like me, you stick to the left wall until you go around the entire loop. But it's one of the areas that if you didn't like what you end up with, it's not going to be the end of the world, because there's at least 4 routes from one end of the area to the other. And this is crisscrossing, this is not including using the tops of buildings. It ends up being an area that has so much versatility and so many options that it's very difficult to just pick one and stick to it. So, while today we're going to be taking down Janus Cobb, passing that in, and probably taking down Janus and stopping by Old Haven, we are also going to hopefully take a trip to the Trash Coast next week. But that's a story for another time. If you have been enjoying what you see, are curious just how ridiculous the Borderlands ammo-less weapon challenge is, I'd love for you to drop a like down below, leave a subscribe, and I would love to catch you next week. Hoofty, I'm struggling with words today. Until next time, I hope you all have a good one. You know, if every single mission was half as easy as today's were, I don't think I would be challenge running games at all. This just felt very one note, very fast, very ferocious. Hopefully next week gives a little more challenge. And if it does, I hope that it all goes about as well as it can.